Have you ever stopped and wondered why you'll race to a store for a sale, but then turn around and dream about owning something that's ridiculously expensive? Or why a super successful pizza shop can't just keep hiring more and more cooks forever? Well, it turns out there's this invisible set of rules guiding pretty much everything we do, from what's in your shopping cart to what happens on a factory floor. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on them.
It's a real paradox when you think about it, right? We're hardwired to hunt for a good deal, but at the same time, we're totally drawn to things that are exclusive and hard to get. The answer to this strange tug of war, and a whole lot more, actually comes down to just a handful of core economic ideas. So let's dive in. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the absolute basics, the number one rule of demand. Then we'll flip that question around to see how sellers use this rule as their secret weapon. We'll even look at those weird situations where more expensive is actually better. After that, we're switching gears to the world of making things to solve the crowded kitchen problem and figure out how businesses find that perfect, just right size.
Let's kick things off with the bedrock of it all. Seriously, if you get this one concept, you basically understand the engine that drives almost every single purchase you've ever made in your life.
It's called the law of demand, and honestly, it's about as simple as it sounds. The easiest way to think about it is like a seesaw. When the price of something goes up, our desire to buy it goes down. But when that price drops, all of a sudden, we want way more of it.
And this, right here, is that seesaw effect in action. One side goes up, the other has to go down. You see this play out everywhere, every single day, whether it's the price of gas or a flash sale email that pops into your inbox.
Just think about your favorite streaming service for a second. If you got an email tomorrow saying the monthly price is doubling, what's your first reaction? You're probably thinking about canceling, right? But what if they announced a 50% off sale? People would be signing up like crazy. That's the law of demand, plain and simple.
Okay, but here's where things get really interesting. We as buyers react to prices. But you know what? Smart sellers don't just pick a price and cross their fingers. No, they take this exact same rule and they flip it on its head to use it to their advantage.
They use something called the inverse demand function. Now that sounds complicated, but it's really just the seller's secret weapon. See, they're not asking how many can we sell if we price it at 20 bucks. Instead, they're asking, if we only want to sell, say, 500 of these, what is the absolute highest price we can possibly charge? It's all about working backwards to squeeze out the most profit.
Check out how this works for something like a concert t-shirt. The seller just has to plug the numbers into their formula. If they want to create a really exclusive, limited edition vibe and only sell 20 shirts, boom. The math tells them they can jack the price all the way up to $40. But if their goal is to move a lot of shirts, say 60 of them, the formula shows they've got to drop that price down to $20. It's like a crystal ball for pricing.
So, lower price equals more buyers. That seems pretty straightforward, right? Well, not always. What happens when making something more expensive actually makes more people want it? Yeah, welcome to the twilight zone of economics, where the rules get broken. It really forces you to stop and ask the question, is cheaper always what we're looking for as buyers? And the answer, surprisingly, is a big nope. And it tells us something really fascinating about how our brains work.
These bizarre items are called Veblen goods. You can think of them as living in a totally alternate economic universe. We're talking luxury watches, designer handbags, supercars. For these things, a crazy high price tag isn't a turnoff, it's the main feature. The higher the price, the higher the demand. The psychology behind this is all about one thing: status. You're not just buying a fancy watch, you're buying a tiny billboard for your wrist that screams, "I can afford this." So if that price were to suddenly drop, the billboard gets smaller. The item loses its exclusive edge, and poof, so does the desire to own it. The high price is the product.
Okay, let's switch gears. We've talked about the psychology of buying. Now let's get into the hard logic of making things. So imagine your business is booming. The obvious solution is just to hire more people and throw them at the problem, right? Well, as it turns out, that's a perfect recipe for disaster. This brings us to the law of diminishing marginal returns. And the most important word in that whole phrase is eventually. What it means is, if you keep adding more of one ingredient, let's say workers, while your other resources, like the size of your kitchen, stay fixed, each new person you add will eventually start contributing less and less.
Let's watch this play out in that pizza kitchen. So one worker, all by himself, he's a machine, cranking out 10 pizzas an hour. You add a second worker, and that's a huge boost. Together they make 18 pizzas, so you gained 8 more. Awesome. But let's fast forward. You've hired a fifth worker. Now the kitchen is pure chaos. People are bumping elbows, they're waiting for their turn at the single oven, they're just getting in each other's way.
And what's the result of adding that fifth person? After all the extra cost and chaos, how much more did you get? 1. A single extra pizza per hour. Your return on that new hire has totally tanked. You, my friend, have officially hit the crowded kitchen problem.
So, if just hiring more people eventually stops working, what's the long-term solution for a growing business? Well, it's not about just getting bigger. It's about scaling smarter. The real goal is to find the absolute perfect size for your whole operation, to get beyond the limits of that one crowded kitchen.
And this leads us to our final big idea for today, the minimum efficient scale, or MES for short. You can think of this as the Goldilocks zone for any business. It's that sweet spot where you're big enough to be super efficient, but not so huge that you become slow and wasteful. It's the exact point where the cost to make each individual item is as low as it can possibly go. This chart shows it perfectly. Look, if your factory is too small, your cost for each item is high because you just can't be efficient. Then, if you get too big, things like bureaucracy and management overhead can actually make your costs start to creep back up. But right there in the middle, that's the minimum efficient scale. That's the sweet spot where you have the lowest possible cost per unit. Think about a massive car factory, for example. They do these calculations, and they might figure out that their MES is producing exactly 100,000 cars a year. At that specific number, their assembly lines, their supply chains, everything is running at peak perfection. If they produce any fewer, or even any more, the cost to build each individual car would actually start to go up.
All right, so let's bring it all home. These 5 rules are constantly working behind the scenes, shaping our economic world. You've got the simple seesaw of the law of demand. You have sellers using inverse demand to find that perfect price. You've got the weird world of Veblen goods, where status is everything. And on the production side, you've got the hard limits of diminishing returns and the ultimate quest to find that just right minimum efficient scale.
And that brings me to one last thing I want you to think about. These rules were really born in an age of factories and mass production. But we're now living in a world of AI, on-demand 3D printing, and products that are customized just for you. So my question is, as our world keeps changing, which of these fundamental rules do you think is going to be the first one to crack? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.